let's move on. We're doing mega segments, I guess, today. One segment is like 30 minutes, and I don't know however long this one's going to go, but whatever. That's what we do here. We yak and pretend like we know what we're talking about. So a guy I pegged, it's one of those again where it's like, well, is this a reach? I don't know. I looked back a couple of years ago, and the Bengals made a big splashy move, and we actually had him on the show, which was pretty cool, for Trey Waynes. And Trey Waynes was a guy that, a first round pick, had a couple of nice seasons with Minnesota. There was some injury stuff, but I mean, that was kind of one of this, that was, he and DJ Reader were the start of the big free agency forays in outside free agency for the Bengals. Unfortunately, Trey Waynes, to the chagrin of many, did not materialize, but there was a player who was kind of an afterthought who ended up stepping in and having to start really for the better part of 2 years because of injuries to different cornerbacks. And then, some youth behind him. And that was Eli Apple. So Eli Apple was a guy, we all know the story behind him. He was a guy that kind of bounced around a little bit, former high pick, really kind of an up and down career, and really steadied himself and played, pretty decent and solid football for the Bengals, and really was a nice Band-Aid over that whole Trey Waynes situation, his injury, and I think he retired, right? Didn't Waynes retire from football? So, so it was a nice, you remember, John, this was one of those kind of reclamation projects, so to speak, former high pick. They know the talent's there. Can you mine it out? And Lou Anarumo sure as hell did that. And now they've decided to go a different route, and another player with a very similar career arc. And he's a guy that is probably not going to start, but he might be your CB4, maybe step in when needed and be out on the field here and there. Maybe he's kind of the guy that steps a little bit into the Trey Flowers role and mixes and matches with some different people. And that is going to be Sidney Jones. And Sidney Jones, there's an argument to be had that, oh man, he's fringe roster. He may not even make the team. And there's an argument to be had that he could do some things a la Eli Apple, right? He could kind of be one of those guys that has a nice career renaissance. And really, this is all about the Lou Anarumo effect. PFF just ranked Lou Anarumo as the league's best defensive coordinator based on what he has done with the Cincinnati Bengals, based on what he has done in the postseason and points allowed or lack thereof. And this is a guy who will benefit greatly under the tutelage of Lou Anarumo. Here's just some snapshot stats. 154 total tackles. Was drafted in the second round of 2017. 115 of those 154 tackles are solo. Only 4 tackles for loss. 4 interceptions over the course of a handful of years. Didn't have any last year. Passes defended. I did like this number, especially for a guy that was in and out of the lineup. 30 of those, but just 1 last year. 1 forced fumble. 2022 passer rating allowance, I think, was 85.7, so that's a little high. But the Bengals are banking on, kind of these middle numbers of the PFF scores that you see throughout his career. 50.7 was a rookie, 47.5, yikes. Then you get to 63.5 and into the 70s and whatnot. So that's kind of what they're banking on to get out of this guy. This was his RAS score, 5.73, so nothing real great there. He does have decent size. He's about 6 feet. 190-ish, good speed, 4.47. So, you see there the speed grade is good. It's really more the explosion and all of that was poor. Size is okay. So, there's things you like about him. He's a productive kid out of Washington. Here's a nice play. I think this is a back shoulder throw from Trevor Lawrence. He turns around and kind of tips it away. Here's an interception off Aaron Rodgers. Reads it nice here. I think this is it again. Nice play there. Nice tackle in space right there. I think that's a tackle for loss. And here's A.J. Green knocking a ball away in the end zone there. So that's a nice play. And then he picks on A.J. Green again and picks one off here against Arizona. And one final one from Trevor Lawrence, steps in and almost picks off that. I think that was Trevor Lawrence's rookie year. So maybe he had a little bit of a propensity to stare down, and obviously not the same guy that he was in his second year. So there's some nice plays in there. There's nothing, not a ton of film and not a ton of stuff to work with, but you can see there, there's some athleticism there. There's some ball skills there. There's some stickiness. I did notice on that play to AJ Green where he knocked it away in the end zone, he's getting a little handsy. And there's some jersey pulling there that maybe could have been called, but all in all, I think this is a good depth guy. I think this is one of those guys where if God forbid there is an injury to one of the top guys, or there's a setback in Cheeto's recovery or something like that, this becomes an important guy like Eli Apple was. So, is he going to, give you, a Reggie Nelson effect? I know it's a different position, but, right away give you a Reggie Nelson effect and multiple interceptions and all this kind of stuff? No, but I think he could be a nice piece as a part of the whole, especially in what may be one of his, he's bounced around a lot. This may be one of his last chances to really latch on to a team. And this coach is really one of his best, if not his best chance to really spark a renaissance in his career.
Yeah, his career has been interesting. He was, Bengals and first-round cornerbacks are kind of synonymous. He wasn't a first-round cornerback, but he may have
almost
been had he not suffered. I believe it was an Achilles injury, or it was either a knee or an Achilles. I think it was like right after the combine that greatly, obviously, impacted his draft status. And he was a second-round pick with the Eagles, and he never really got going with them. He didn't really look the part until he got to Jacksonville in 2020, but he was only there for a year. It was 2021 with the Seahawks, which I believe was where that clip was. It was against the Jags. He ended up starting after week 4 for the Seahawks, and he played like 730 snaps. He ended up with a coverage grade for PFF of 69.2. And something that was interesting, and this was found by Neil Engelberger, who was a great follow on Twitter. If you still have if you can still see tweets, Sidney Jones has always graded above 64 in zone, but he was very more inconsistent in man coverage, according to PFF's grading chart. The Bengals obviously play a lot of different coverages, but for the most part, it's a lot of off coverage for their cornerbacks. And also, Sidney Jones is a really good tackler, as we saw in some of those clips as well. He only had 6 missed tackles in 2021, which is like the only season that he was, in any sense, like a full-time starter. He had 6 missed tackles compared to 57 tackles. So that's a missed tackle rate of 8.3%. Consistently great tackler over the course of his career, despite not being built like a thick cornerback. I think he's like 6 foot, 180 pounds. He's never like the greatest athlete either, but always consistently make great breaks on the balls and always was able to square up and make a good tackle, which is very, like, the Bengals don't employ cornerbacks who can't tackle. Like that's one of the reasons why Trey Waynes was identified in the first place. But if you can't tackle, you're probably not going to see the field in the Bengals defense. And I think that was no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, like that's just an identifier for them. Like 27-year-old free agent who was drafted high. He fits all these different qualities that they look for in defensive backs. It made total sense why they signed him. It's just a matter of what his role is. If he could even carve out a role, like, you're pretty confident in where the cornerback room is right now. And now Sidney Jones looks like he's going to fill a role that I think Eli Apple probably should have had in these past 2 years, right? The emergency cornerback who plays maybe a couple hundred snaps in a season because of injuries, instead of being out there for, close to 800 or 1,000 snaps as a full-time starter. You don't know if you're going to get a consistent player in Sidney Jones if he plays 16, 17 games in the season, but he has all the qualities that Lou Anarumo identifies in defensive backs and cornerbacks. He's still young enough, he's still athletic enough, and he's been relatively injury-free in recent years. I guess his tenure in Seattle kind of ended unexpectedly and ended up not doing so well with the Raiders, which is why they didn't bring him back and he was a free agent in the first place. But a lot of boxes that were checked with Sidney Jones, and it makes total sense why he would be cornerback number 4 this year.
I bring this graphic back up because we glossed over it a little bit. What you were referencing in terms of, kind of becoming a starter in Seattle and turning the corner. These are PFF overall scores, not coverage, but the 63.5 in the third year, 68.1 in the fourth year. And then he shot up to 70.2 overall, in 2021, I think it was, and then had a big dip last year. But I mean, you see that the talent is there. And here's the thing. I mean, in the past too, he was asked to start, and that's not really, an emergency starter here. That's not really what his role will be or is envisioned to be here. It's the Bengals have kind of been on the forefront of these, super core of wide receivers where you're 3-4 receivers deep, and you got to have multiple defensive backs, multiple corners out there, 3, 4, 5 deep that can run with and play with a lot of different receivers. We've seen that in the postseason. The teams are kind of stacking up the weaponry like the Bengals built with Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. So, I think that, like you said, aside from him checking a lot of physical boxes and skill set boxes, it's also just, hey, he's an able corner, and if he's out there covering the fourth the fourth wideout, the third wideout, that sort of thing. That's a plus for us. This guy started in the league. It's a plus for us.
Yeah, I think compared to Eli Apple, he's at the very least like a net zero change. I think at the very least, I think if anything, he's probably an upgrade. Now again, durability that matters. Like, can you stay on the field? Because Eli Apple is pretty durable with the Bengals. He rarely ran into a lot of injury issues. Then that's kind of been what's hindered Sidney Jones's NFL career, despite being drafted in the second round. But again, if he makes the team, and that's a whole other thing, right? You had a really good camp out of DJ Ivy, who's going into training camp pretty hot. You still have Alan George, a cornerback. You still have Jalen Davis, who I think signed a 2-year extension or whatever. So you have a deep cornerback room, which is where you want to be. But if he does make the team, it's just inevitable. We talked about this with Emmanuel Forbes as a potential first-round target. Cornerback depth is going to get tested throughout the season. And he's probably going to end up playing at least 100 or 200 snaps this season. Pretty significant snaps, too, in pretty important games. That's going to happen. And I think, based off of just the tape that's most recent and situations where, his skill set fits what the defense is asking him to do, I think he fits pretty well in the Bengals defense. And this is a vet minimum signing. Again, if he gets cut, it has no impact on the salary cap or anything. He can probably even be brought back on the practice squad if it ends up like that. And if he is cut, again, that's probably a good sign for both Alan George and DJ Ivy, doing really well in the preseason. But obviously, Sidney's going to play a ton in the preseason. You're not going to see Woozier. You're not going to see Taylor Britt. You're not going to see Mike Hilton very much out there. So he's going to get a lot of chances. And I think he also had an interception in minicamp too, which again, it's minicamp. It's throwing its air for the most part. But no, I think he's got a good chance of doing something for this team this year.
Yeah, I'm running the risk that he may not even make the team, but I just think, again, not a star, but potentially an important role player, right? A guy that can come into the defense and kind of continue this momentum that they've had the last couple of years. And I think you said it, but what is he, 24 years old, going to be 25 soon? I mean, he's still young.
He's 27.
Is he 27? Oh, I thought he said he was 25. Okay. Well, regardless.
Still very young. As someone who's turning 27 in 2 days, it's very young.
Yes. I personally wish I was turning 27 in a couple of days. So I'm that's so far in the rear view for me, bro. Oh my God. Anyway, but still youngish. Yeah. And I don't want to say, his career could be in jeopardy if it doesn't work here, but I do feel like this is one of the best chances he's got based on the coaching, based on the track record of success that we saw with someone very similar in Eli Apple. It just seems to kind of make sense.
And it also made sense to not bring back Apple along with Jones, because again, even if obviously more depth is good at cornerback, but it seems like it's just two guys vying for the same role and they're going up against other guys. It almost seemed like there was just too many guys to fit, there weren't enough reps to go around for everyone to get a fair shake. Now you have Sidney Jones taking over as that former high draft pick, again entering his late 20s and going up against a bunch of other young guys, right? So
mid to late.
He fits that role to a T. I think they did a good job of essentially replacing Eli Apple.